The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Mike, I'd like to ask you one more question. A lot of people keep saying this, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but they keep saying, well, why don't you just pull out the handcuffs and arrest Obama? I know there's a reason for that. Why don't you just explain how things have to go through a process?
Well, everything like this would have to go through a process. And what you have to realize right now, we are still in the midst of an ongoing investigation. We have what we believe probable cause, that even it goes beyond probable cause. We believe we have irrefutable evidence that the document is a forgery. However, we are still in the investigatory stage. We are still gathering more information even as we speak, as early as this morning. So that being said, it's still an ongoing investigation. If this were finished, I would compile all this information into an investigative report, turn it over to the sheriff. The sheriff would then review it and make a determination on where he would send this. If we wanted to, quote, say, arrest the occupant of the White House, we would have to submit this information in a complaint to our Attorney General's office. You have to realize any prosecutor, any Attorney General has what's called prosecutorial discretion. He can make a judgment and say, yeah, there may be a crime here, but our ability to get a conviction is almost non-existent, so they're going to decline prosecution. We don't want that to happen. So we're holding out, and we think we have a better way to handle this. But going forward, it's not the sheriff's office that brings the charges. We bring the complaint. It would be up to a prosecutor to level the charges and issue whatever warrants would need to be issued at that time. You have to also realize this is the President of the United States. It's not going to happen like you see on television. It's going to all be done through courts and paper if it were ever to come to that. And that's a stretch to think it's ever going to come to that. I mean, we have a fraudulent document. In our state, the statute is very clear that you have to knowingly possess and knowingly proffer the document. The operative word there is knowingly. And to get around that hurdle, it's going to take a little work. So, I know people, they watch things. They watch things on television and they think that's the way it works. The truth of the matter is it doesn't, and it can be very frustrating at times. What Sheriff Arpaio wants to do is he wants to go to Congress with this, and we are making strides to get it to Congress. And there are a couple reasons for that. If we were to file a charge today in state court, even if that got in there today, with all the legal wrangling and delays, that would probably be sitting there for about 2 years. At some point in time, through legal maneuvers, they would then get it remanded to a federal court. There it'll sit for another 3, 4, or 5 years. At some point in time, the federal court could say, you know what, this needs to go to the FBI. Goes to the FBI, especially under this administration, it's never going to see the light of day. We don't want to go through all that. We don't think we have time to go through all that, and we know right now under this administration what that outcome is going to be. So Sheriff Arpaio wants this to go to Congress, and that's what we're working towards right now.
I think that's the best idea. Mike, are you currently still doing investigation right now? Are you still uncovering information? Are you still out there pounding the streets? Are you still looking at things that you haven't finished up?
Yeah, we are, Mike. As a matter of fact, we only got some new information that actually not only bolsters our position, but it actually, in my opinion, is the death nail into this whole issue. And that was only uncovered about 4 weeks ago. There's more information that we discovered in that document. That PDF file is like the perfect crime scene. All your evidence has been left there. All you have to do is uncover it, and that's what we're doing. So we are, right up until today, still pursuing leads, still putting pieces of this puzzle together. We haven't stopped.
Great. I guess one thing leads to another.
One thing sometimes on this thing leads to 10 different places, and 9 of them are dead ends. It's been a rough go.
I can understand that. I'm glad you clarified for all the listeners about why things haven't been done right away and the way things need to be done, and that you are working on things and moving forward, and the time will come. Mike, when this thing started out, it went on, and it's just become a nightmare, especially with all the scandals that have emerged over the past couple of months. I don't know anything. I wasn't there. The White House is not aware of it. I may have read a newspaper article about it. It's just absurd.
Well, you know, Mike, I got to tell you, I didn't know anything about this until I got the call from the sheriff to come and look at this thing. And even the sheriff's own words to me when this came his way, he said, "Look, I don't think there's anything here, Mike." He goes, "So let's, clear this document, clear the president, and we'll go over there and tell the world it's all good, and let's move the country forward," because he didn't really think there was anything here. But he did tell me this in his next breath. He said, "But I want you to do a thorough and professional, unbiased investigation into this." So that's what we did. And when I got the document, and I call it a document, it's really never been a document. It's never been a hard paper document. It's a PDF file. It lives in cyberspace inside a computer's memory chip. But when I got it, it was about 4 days later that I had to call him and say, "Sheriff, I think we're going to have a little bit of an issue here. We don't think this thing is legitimate. I'm going to have to really look into it." And he gave the green light to go ahead and do that. And we are now 21 months later into dealing with this. And it is a slow grind. I mean, you could see just on prosecutions on fraud that the federal government does, sometimes those investigations go on 4 years, 5 years. So, from our standpoint, we're kind of running at warp speed, and it still feels like molasses in the wintertime. But in that time, I can tell you, we've uncovered things. We are the only entity right now that has a court-certified forensic document examiner that has looked at our work, has looked at the document himself, and in his 20-year professional opinion, has deemed the document to be a 100% forgery. It took 18 months to get that. It just took that long. We went through 212 different forensic document examiners, and all of them declared that either on the down low that it was a forgery, but they didn't want to get involved, or others wouldn't even talk to us and just flat out said, "Look, I don't want to get involved in this," and they wouldn't help us. So it took that long just to get that. A certified court-recognized expert is a game changer. And to have that, to me, as far as I'm concerned, is a blessing. It validated everything we did. It validated everything we believed. And he did his own analysis to come to the same conclusion. It really doesn't get any better than that.
Mike, did it come to a point when you were doing the investigation in its beginning that you came to a point and said, "That's it, I'm convinced"? Do you remember that point? Was it a specific thing? Was it a document? Did something just come to you driving down the road one day? Or what made you convinced?
I'm going to tell you what made me convinced, and it happened actually very early on. Dr. Jerome Corsi was the individual that was brought to us. He was in the midst of writing a book called Where's the Birth Certificate? And the birth certificate was offered up by the administration days before Corsi's book was going to be released, and we think it was a preemptive strike. However, Dr. Corsi's information for our purposes was nothing more than investigational information. It was never considered evidence. And I debriefed Dr. Corsi for 14 hours. It was a 2-day debrief. And right around the 14th hour, I actually looked at Jerry and I said, I got to tell you, I see some of the things you're saying here, but I think this is all hogwash. And then I saw the last part of what he was going to show me. And what it was is on that PDF file, the state registrar stamp, which is at the bottom of the document that is used to give the document its legal authority and as a representation of an official document out of the state of Hawaii, could be picked up in an entire block in that computer program and moved around and put anywhere you want it to be. When I saw that, I was convinced I have a forgery. There's no computer that does that. And we put this document through 1,200 independent computer tests to see if we could get a computer program or any recipe in the computer program to duplicate that as a part of scanning in a actual paper document. And after 1,200 tests, it was determined that it cannot be done. So we know that that register stamp was taken from a source document. A source document would have been another birth certificate that had been scanned into a computer, and that register stamp was picked up in a total block and pulled in and placed into the birth certificate image that the White House released. To me, that was hands down, because, Mike, that's the thing that makes the document official. If that's no good, everything else in the document is just an afterthought. If that's no good, the whole document is no good. So that's when I was convinced. Now, what I had to do, and you know this from your law enforcement background, it's not what you know, it's not what you think, it's what you can prove. And we had to go on a quest to prove what we believed was to be true. And in that, we had to actually come against ourselves and try to disprove our own theory. And we were successful. You couldn't disprove it. We know for a fact the document is a fraud.
Well, thank you. Mike, I have one more question for you. We're running out of time. I was looking at the document when it first came out, and something jumped out at me after I had watched Sheriff Joe and your presentation. The part where it says African American about his father. And that was back in '61. I don't believe that people of color were referred to as African American.
They weren't. On the document, it says race of father, and it uses the term African. If you look closely at that in the PDF file, you can see where that resides on a layer, and you could also see what's called pixelization around it. In other words, a tool was used in the computer program to lift those letters and put that word into place. That word was not used in 1960. That word did not come into vogue until 1980s, late 70s, early 80s, and African was not used. The 1961 Vital Statistics Manual clearly states that if a person of color, the race designator is Negro. And I will share this with you. We have two birth certificates, 1961, from black individuals, and on both of their certificates, the race of the father is Negro. So Obama's, again, is the only document that I know of that has a 20-year, what do I want to say, phantom expression of race. It didn't exist in 1960.
Great. Thanks for clearing that up. That's what I wanted to ask, because that stuck out at me, and I know that you do have two copies of other people that were born in the same time frame as Obama. And once again, why is this different, right?
Well, it's like anything else around this individual, Mike. Everything that you look at, all pertinent information about him has some flaw to it, or flaws, plural. We have the birth certificate. The selective service card we know is a forgery. I mean, and that's flawed. You go into his Social Security number. There's questions about it there. There are no college transcripts. You're talking about a man who was the president of the Harvard Law Review and never wrote a paper or a thesis. I mean, there's something wrong with a lot of this. You know, Virginia Sunohara is a little girl who died one day before Barack Obama. In the same, she died in the same hospital. And I went to Hawaii, and the reason why she's a focus is her birth certificate number should be lower than Mr. Obama's, and her birth certificate number is higher by some 400 some odd numbers. It's an impossibility. And I got more information on a little dead baby that lived for 22 hours than I do on the President of the United States that's on the planet over 50 years. That's sad. That's really sad. That's scary. That you can't trace the lineage, you can't trace the roots, you can't trace anything to get any kind of accurate representation of who this individual is.
Mike, we have 30 seconds. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having you back on the show with an update. I'm sure my audience appreciate it. I know we had one or two questions. Once again, Mike, thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mike. You take care now.
All right. Have a good day, Mike.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.